Okay, welcome everyone to today's Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition Reentry Town Hall. Today's topic or name of our town hall is Positioning Catholic Ministries as the First Stop Upon Release with Kolbe House Ministries. But before we dive into that, I'd like to take a moment to go ahead and open us up in prayer. So if you wouldn't mind just finding yourself in a nice seated position, take a few deep breaths. And in a moment, I'll put an icon up on the screen here and invite you to look upon the icon as we read a prayer to accompany it, and listen for the voice or the community named there that you want to hold it in prayer today and walk with today. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Christ, we behold you. We behold our hope and wholeness. We behold the one who takes away the sins of the world. We behold the face of God. The face of God, beheld in the one condemned to perpetual isolation, send us to be your companion. The face of God, beheld in the one confined for seeking a better life, open our hearts to welcome you. The face of God, beheld in the one denied a horizon of hope, instill in us the grace to be present with you. The face of God, beheld in the one relegated to wrestle with darkness, teach us to reflect your light. The face of God, beheld in the one who locks the doors and keeps the order, animate us to listen to you too. The face of God, beheld in the one broken by hurt and injustice, move us to participate in your restoration. We behold the face of God. Amen.
Amen.
So welcome again for being here. Today we have with us Kolbe House Ministry out of the Diocese of Chicago. And Kolbe House is a jail and prison ministry, and today we'll be focusing on their reentry programming. And just briefly, by way of introduction of Kolbe House, they'll have a video in a moment to explain more fully what they do. But of note, they have 4 pillars that ground the work that they do. And those 4 pillars are presence, reconciliation, sanctuary, and advocacy. And with us from Kolbe House today, we have Deacon Pablo Perez, who is the Associate Director of Kolbe House Jail Ministry, Pat Sullivan, who works in reentry and manages a lot of their programming there. And then additionally, we have Dave McEvers, who works in their communications and development with us. And so with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Deacon Pablo to kick us off with any other words, and then we'll start with the video.
Okay. Thank you, everyone that connected this morning with us. And I hope this is a wonderful learning experience for all of you. And as we begin our 1-hour session here, we'll introduce a introduction video that we'll be sharing right now, and then we'll take it off from there. Thank you.
I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Welcome to Kolbe House, the jail ministry of the Archdiocese of Chicago. At Kolbe House, we respond to Jesus' call to visit the imprisoned, to draw close to those who are suffering and in need. In this closeness, we recognize not only our shared imperfection and sin, but also the inherent goodness and dignity that we all share as human beings created in the image and likeness of God. Kolbe House is located just 2 blocks from the main site of our ministry, Cook County Jail. Every day, thousands of men and women are detained here as they await trial. Jails and prisons like this are products of a system of justice that seeks to punish those who have done wrong. The resulting economic and racial inequality further isolates people from the community and resources they need most. Our Catholic faith calls us to imagine justice differently. To imagine justice as restoration of right relationship, accountability for those who have caused harm, and healing for victims and community. Our faith calls us to realize that when one member of the body is suffering, we all suffer. At Kolbe House, we strive to promote hope, healing, and faith in God's merciful love among all those who are impacted by incarceration. In addition to our ministry inside the jail, we also offer a warm welcome to those who are released from incarceration. We respond to their immediate material needs for clothing, toiletries, food, and transportation. But the relationship goes beyond these necessities. We walk with them as they acclimate to life on the outside, build new relationships, and navigate the difficulties of finding housing, employment, and anything else they may need. We grow in mutual respect and appreciation, healing each other of the wounds that we have. Kolbe House is a santuario, a safe place to bring people together in a common mission. These hands were made by children and adults from our various ministries, currently and formerly incarcerated, families affected by incarceration and violence, donors and volunteers, and members of a Catholic parish. We visit, we write, we offer comfort and encouragement. We each have a story to tell. In this collage, all the hands are touching each other, and they all reach up towards the wounded hands of the resurrected Jesus. This image is a symbol of the incredible healing power that happens when we reach out together as a community to ask Jesus for healing and reconciliation. This is the work of Kolbe House, but this is also the work of the Church. Together we create peace and healing in the world. We go to the imprisoned with our hands and hearts open to Jesus.
Great, thank you for sharing that video, Dave, Pablo, and Pat. I'd like to now just take a moment to invite all of you who are present here to turn on your camera if you feel so comfortable, so that we can try and cultivate a virtually present community as much as we can in this town hall setting. And as we begin our conversation today with Kolbe House representatives, if you have questions that come up, please put them in the chat. Myself and Kara will be monitoring the chat as we go along. And then here at about the half-hour mark or so, we'll open up the floor for any questions and Q&A that we might have, so that we can learn some more from our friends here from Kolbe House. So with that, I'll pass it on over to Deacon Pablo, and you can take it away.
Okay, thank you. What is the meaning of the first stop? When a client who has the minimum or no family support gets released from the jail or prison, his or her first stop will be a reentry ministry who will help them to meet their immediate needs. Why is that important? It's important because I'm going to give an example from this week. 2 days ago, there was 2 young men that came out directly from state prison. They came here. They literally had their sweatpants, gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt and some white gym shoes on. That's all they had. And the first 72 hours is so important because many things happen and it is real fast for them. So we figured that's why we call this the first stop, and the 72 hours is key for many reasons. And we'll talk more about all those reasons. But the most important thing is to get a hold of them, have them contact us or stop by here before or after they go to the halfway house. I'm just going to give you a quick crash course on what happens when they first get released from prison. A lot of you might know, a lot of you might not know. Me, in my case, I'm always learning something new from them. To me, they're our teachers. They teach us how to do this ministry, and they teach us new things that we might not know, or we didn't know that it happens when they first come out. When they come out, like we say, they don't have much of their property that they come out with, only what they are able to purchase in prison. They could bring it with them, but if it's just too much, they won't. They give them a bus fare or a train ticket going downtown to Union Station. And from there, they have to make their way to the halfway house. The majority of the halfway houses that we work with is Cornerstone. And there are 5 houses that are in Roseland neighborhood in Chicago. From downtown all the way there, they would have to make their way by train or in bus, which is 115th and State surrounding area, all 5 houses. So that would take anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour and a half just to get there. And let me tell you, a lot of the men that have come out of prison have been in prison for a while. So a lot of things have changed. Some of them do not know the city. They do not know their way around to navigate how to get there, but they have to make it on their own. There's no one that's going to pick them up from the halfway house or the state. They're on their own once they're on the train or on the bus. So they have to make their way there. Some of them will get here during the day or in the afternoon. There's other men that will not get there until about 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the evening. Yet they still have to make their way over to the halfway house. And why did we say 72 hours is key and is important? Because the first 72 hours, for anyone that has to register for whatever registry they have to do, they have 72 hours to go to the police station and register. They cannot register if they do not have a state ID, a birth certificate, or a social security. Some prisons are doing that already, but not all of them. So the majority of them are coming out without any identification other than the state prison ID that they give them, which that is really not, they can't use that for anything. And whatever money they come out with is $25. I learned this 2 days ago from these 2 men that were released. Come out with $25 that the state gives them, cash. And if they have any money on their books, it will be put on a Visa credit debit card. So they could buy some food on their way or when they get here. But other than that, they do not have nothing else. They do not have family to pick them up or meet them anywhere else. That's part of what the first 72 hours is, trying to get them established, trying to get them to the halfway house and try to meet some of their immediate needs as far as clothing and other items that we need. So that's just the beginning part of it. And why it's important, because they, like I mentioned, they have to register. And in order to register, they would have to pay $100, which they do not have. But yet they have to come up with that $100 to register. And if they don't have proper ID, like I mentioned, then that will be a real big obstacle for them. And they do have the bare minimum, as I mentioned, and they are on their own. Once they get to the halfway houses, they will help them navigate a lot of the other resources. But the first contact they will do is call Kolbe House once they get to the halfway house too. So I'll leave it at that. I'll change it over to Pat and have her do a little bit of introduction and input on what we do here during our first 72 hours. She has dealt with many of our clients too. Pat?
So for these clients that are coming, for us, it's beginning a relationship. And, some of them are shorter, some of them are longer. I have a couple that have been long-term, and we try to, when they come to us, to assess where they're at. And we actually we have an assessment that we do. It's finding out what their needs are. Do they have family support at all? Or if they have family, are they able to help them out at all? And a lot of them, they may have family, but they're just barely surviving themselves. Or I have some that are just all alone. The one was in for 33 years from the age of 19. Died while he was in. He lost track of his brother. So that first 72 hours was totally frightening for him, but at the same time, exhilarating because he was free. So we begin the relationship with them. We try to see what kind of identification they have. And I'll call him Mel. He had nothing. He never had a social security card. He came from Mississippi that didn't have a birth certificate. So with those things, nothing can progress. You can't get a link card to help get with food. It's difficult. He had to register. They didn't tell him that he needed to register. It wasn't in his release papers. And like Deacon Pablo said, he had to make it on his own. So we're looking, we are accompanying them so that when they're first getting, of course, they need their ID so they can get employment. They want to work. Everybody that I've met and other volunteers, they want to work, but they need to get that help to get IDs. So a lot of these halfway houses do try to help them with that. And we also have the Pope Francis Center that comes once a week. We make appointments to help men that are these men. But then, when they get out, a lot of them can't move those first 72 hours. The parole agent, they have to wait till they get there. They may be restricted after that in their movement and have to get permission early on. So it's difficult for them. And they need help with transportation. And that's where, we came in. And that film showed the venture cards that we have. We have 3 days, 7 days. And then once they get a job, we help them with a monthly until they can get some money, funding. So the relationship grows as time goes on, but that first 72 hours, it's critical for them to know that somebody's there for them. And so we begin that, and then we try to do frequent follow-ups with them and let them know you can call us. If you just need to talk, just call us. We're here to listen to you. So we want to be ready to continue to mentor them. If they're in a shorter time period, they might be able to get on their own more easily. But someone like Mel that was in for a long time with no family, it takes them a long time. Deacon Pablo, anything you want to add?
Yes, definitely. It takes them a long time. A lot of the things that is common for us is not. So when we're ministering to them, we want to make sure that they know how to use a ventral card. For us, it's easy. Sometimes, like Pat said, the longer they're in there, all this is new to them. They ain't got no idea how to use a ventral card. At times, I've had walked to the train station with a guy coming back from prison and showing him how to use the ventral card in the machine and not to leave it there. Because I gave him a ventral card and innocently, I assume he knew. I gave him his ventral card, and then he comes back, he's like, I don't know what to do with it. So I walked and I went with him, explained to him how to use the ventral card, how to put it in the machine, and when it pops out, to grab it, don't leave it there and leave, because you're still going to need that ventral card. One of the other things that we do offer is on cell phones. How could they navigate to any things that they need to do for themselves without a cell phone? Everywhere you go to apply for anything, they're going to ask you, what's your best contact number? So we purchase cell phones that are not that expensive. They're decent. smartphones, right now the prices went up, but it's at about $103 right now versus 85. But to us, that's real important that they get a cell phone so they could start communicating and setting them up with an account, email account, so they could start looking for jobs and help them with their resume, whether it's ourselves or there's other organizations. But the halfway houses do help them with that also. So whenever they're not able to, then we try to help or resource them out. Because Kolbe House, obviously, we try to do as much as we can, but we are, as a ministry that everyone is, we'll have our limitations and know that there's someone else out there that might be doing what they need already. It's just a matter of us connecting with them directly. But when we do any referrals, we want to make sure first that they will be taken care of. Because one of the things we at Kolbe House do is we want to make sure when we refer someone, they're going to be taken care of. Because it's real discouraging for them to go to a place and have them send them to somewhere else or tell them, no, we can't do that. So we want to make sure we follow up first before we refer any of our clients to anyone, anywhere else. Before we move on to where it says how people know to go to Kolbe House, I want to mention one more thing that is real important for us all to know. Pre-COVID, Kolbe House was handling reentry clients anywhere between 10 and 15 clients per month. From the COVID on to now to the present, we get anywhere between 10 and 15 per week. So that's how drastically our reentry ministry has increased, where now we have to make sure we have volunteers that cover from Monday through Friday. We try to have, our goal is to have 2 to 4 ministers in there so we could do a real good, efficient job and making sure that someone is here. Putting a bag together of things, material things that they need, whether it's clothes, shoes, all the essentials, cosmetics, venture cards, subway cards, meal cards for them to eat. All that is easy. We could put that together in a red bag where it says Kolbe House, that we actually have bags, red bags that is printed and says Kolbe House Ministry. So they could keep that with them and carry it with them. That is the easiest part. What I mentioned to all of our reentry people here, as I'm in charge of the reentry ministry also, is that is easy. The most important thing that I want you to get involved with is getting to know who you're helping, getting to know the person that's coming here. Spend half an hour at least listening, and then probably just talking, just having a conversation. Don't tell them what to do. If they're in prison, that's what they always been told. As long as they're incarcerated, they tell them what to do every single day of their lives. That's the last thing we should do. We could encourage them and advise them, but the most important thing is listen to what they're truly trying to say and what they're struggling with. And sometimes, and we do ask personal questions, and I ask, and they say, why so many personal questions? The only way for us, Kolbe House, to help you is to know who you are and to see what are other things that might be there that you need help. So we could address them and figure them out, that there's other things that you've been impacted by being incarcerated for such a long time, whether it's physical, mental, or spiritual. We're here to accompany you. Our ministry is just a presence and to accompany them in their journey back into society, where for them is different than what it is for everyone else. It's real challenging because not everyone's welcoming. Not everyone is willing to give them a job or a place to stay. So that's where we're at. How do they know about us? Many of them know about Kolbe House through the jail system, because the majority of the men from Cook County Jail that have been here anywhere between a year and 10 years waiting for trial, they've learned of Kolbe House through our religious volunteers ministry or programming ministers that go into the jail. So they already have a knowledge of who we are. So when they come out of prison, they know who to contact, or before they'll start calling or letter writing to try to connect with us right before that happens. But the other way is through the word of mouth from themselves. other men that are incarcerated, they know about us, and the men that don't, or women that don't know, they will pass on the information, and that's how the connection happens. So those are some of the ways that they communicate with us. But the halfway houses and other organizations that deal with reentry men and women, like Cornerstone, Hand in Hand, Amir's House, Alex House, we have a Safe Haven and Safer Foundation and Haymarket. Any of those organizations, in one way or another, they all know who Kolbe House is. So they are always referring their own clients to us. And the only thing we require is that they have recently been released from incarceration. That's all we ask for. So I'll turn it over to Pat right now and see what else she wants to share before we start going into the questions and answers. As we see, we're coming up to the 30-minute mark.
I guess what I had mentioned, and I'll say it again, we have a database that we call Salesforce. And so when we're first with them and getting information, all that, we make note of all the different things. And every interaction we have with the person, we make note about, what do we help them with? What was going on with the person? Were they struggling, mentally? Did they have issues? And if, the volunteer wasn't there the next day, the next person could quickly, when that release person calls, quickly scan the interactions and know where that person's coming from and be there to continue that accompaniment. When they are first out, just having a connection, helps them, because it's such a scary time. They feel alone and readjusting. And one of them mentioned, because I remembered all these things, but it was because I made note. After I had met with that person for 30 minutes and subsequent interactions with them, I made notes about things. So when I talked to the person, I remembered that his sister died while he was incarcerated. Those things that make it really personal. So that helps us to keep that close touch with them. So, and with our assessments, we have that initial assessment, which they could be at 40 or 50% when it calculates. And as we go on through time, we do additional assessments. So, for example, they might start at 50, but then when they get to that 98, they're standing on their own. And that's our job, not to enable them. It's to work towards getting them to be independent and have their own life, but still have that connection to us to call when something happens. They got the car, but they got in a car accident. It's a setback, and setbacks are harder for them when they're starting out, but we're there to continue that connection and be a friend to them, someone that they can talk to. We're not fixing things for them. We can refer them to resources that will help them with whatever it is. So very rewarding. A lot of them will come and go quickly, but there's a lot of them that do keep in touch, and you have that.
I see there's a couple questions here already.
Okay.
One says, how long do you typically work with individuals? Is it long term? If so, what does retention looks like? How do you keep folks engaged? We keep folks engaged by doing follow-ups weekly. We do follow-ups weekly with them, whether it's by phone or in person. And from our experience, how long do we work with an individual? It depends on them. Some want to just get what they need, move on, get a job, and get out of the halfway house. There's other guys that will hang around longer because they might need other help, assistance, or they might have setbacks, as Pat said. But honestly, I think someone that has been incarcerated on and off their whole lives, or maybe one time, but for anywhere between 5 and 15 years, a person to honestly get back on their feet will take at least 18 months, at least. So we'll retain them as long as we can. But as Pat said, we want to make sure we get them to that point where their assessment is close to 100%, where they're on their feet, and then there's no need for weekly check-ins. But we do encourage them, call us and let us know you're doing well and where you're at. But if anything happens and there's a big setback and you have to start all over again, we're here in contacting us. So that's one of the questions. Maybe you want to answer the second question, Pat?
What was the second question?
If you are near Cook County Jail, how do people from the state prison or federal facilities find out about Kolbe House? And are the halfway house facilities for women?
The halfway houses that we're connected with, they allow them 90 days. I think the halfway houses that we deal with are with men. We do have there is this, what is it? Haymarket. That has a lot of rehabilitation programs, and we get a lot of women through there. Our clients are mostly men, because those incarcerated are such a large part of that population, unfortunately. Did I miss anything? Deacon?
No, I think as far as the women are more stable when it comes to having the relationship with the family. They still have a connection. So that's why the numbers is less, a lot less than the men are. The men have literally broken all relationships with their family at that point. Some still have relationship and support, but not fully. But the woman, from our experience, my experience, personal experience, is that they have support. They have a house to go to. They have their kids to go back to. But yes, Haymarket, and then there's some recovery homes where they go. And then that's how the connection are.
If I may,
yes,
Pablo, one of the things that really strikes me about what you've been sharing is the emphasis on relationship. And I know in this reentry work that we do, it can be so overwhelming, as you've experienced in the last few years, as the numbers go up, to try and hold on to that relationship piece. And what I hear you saying, it is not only so important with those who are coming out of confinement, but also with those other organizations, and taking the time to cultivate those relationships, to connect people and get to know the resources around you. And so I'm just, one of the questions that comes up for me is, how do you keep that time for relationship while continuing to minister to the rising number of people? And you mentioned volunteers coming on board, and what are some of the tools and methods and approaches you use to recruiting some of those volunteers and getting people to pitch in?
Yes, definitely. That's when at Kolbe House, we're always hunting for new volunteers. The more we get, the better it is for all of us. And somehow, thank God, we've been willing to manage, even with those large numbers, to help everyone to the best of our availability. We haven't really turned no one away, and even during COVID, Jared, we never closed. I mean, physically the office was closed, but we managed to make our deliveries and go meet them at the halfway house, go meet them wherever we had to meet them, go buy the stuff that we need at Walmart, groceries, whatever it was. We met their needs, and somehow it was a skeleton crew. So we always make sure that we have enough people that want to participate and help us out in our ministry. And that is how we get through all that. And God sends us amazing people all the time. It's like, sometimes we don't even have to ask. They literally will just fall to our door and come on in here. So that's the way that we continue doing. And right now, even though it's in the summer, a lot of our summer reentry people have taken off. So we're not in a skeleton crew, but we're in a schedule that's limited. So we're Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We have clients that we meet with by appointment. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we still have reentry people, but we don't see no appointments. Granted, if someone knocks at the door and they need help, we're not going to say, you know what, today we don't handle clients, come back on Wednesday. They still will be taken care of, but we prefer to try somewhat control our schedule and our time, and make sure that I want to make sure that our volunteers don't get worn out also, because this ministry itself, the longer we do it, it wears us out, it burns us out, not physically. I'm talking about mentally, emotionally, because we literally hear so many stories and struggles that even for ourselves, we have to control our time and our limits, because otherwise we go home and it's like we can't unwind, because we have all these relationships that we're building, and all these complicated relationships with the men and women that we see their struggles, that their struggles become ours, their problems become our problems, and it's like, man, it's a lot. So that's the frustrating part of doing this ministry, that it's so hard to meet all of their needs, and we as Kolbe House know we cannot do it alone. That's why we rely on resourcing with a lot of other people that are in this same type of ministry to help us out and to network together. I see there's another question. I don't want to ignore it. It says, can you pick them up from the jail rather than them having to find their way? At times, if they're able to find their way downtown to Union Station, and if they could get a phone call, at times we've done that. We do not have the capability of doing it because we do not have we don't have enough volunteers to do that, but at times we will meet them downtown and take them to the halfway house, or else they come here and we'll take them to the halfway house, especially if they're not from here, from Chicago. Yeah, they just caught their case here, but they have to do their parole time here. So we do what we can. Second question, why do the state charge $100 to register? Can they waive inmates knowing they may be broke? Yes, it don't make no sense. It's senseless having to have someone register. This is just like the classes. If they have to do any type of classes, it's on their own. They have to pay for the classes. There's places that might be doing it for free, but there's so many men and women being released daily that a lot of these places are filled. So the $100 will be waived, but they would have to go through a whole bunch of different steps to make that waive. First, they would have to go get their ID and get an ID that says homeless. And in order for them to get an ID that says homeless, it has to be notarized by an agency like us. We will have to take the client. This is an example of how I've done it in the past. I would have to take the client, take them to a currency exchange or office where they have public notary, and have them fill out a form that says they're homeless and that we're helping them, and I sign and the client signs, and then they'll go ahead and waive that for them, the $100 fee, even for their ID. But it's a lot of work too for them to do all that. Let's see, does the jail prepare them to re-enter with basic information to help them with the 72 hours period? Yes, they do. Like I said, at least with the prison, they give them $25 cash or in a card to use whatever they want to use it for, to buy something to eat on their way here. And they prepare with them as far as the jail. There's a release package, and in the release package, there's a card that we've given to Cook County Jail that is in there so they could contact us as soon as they leave. And we're literally 3 blocks, 4 blocks, depending on what area they're coming out from. And they could walk here, and then we'll help them.
I was going to say, like situation, they're not always consistent, like the correctional centers. One example is they didn't put in the release papers that the person needed to register, and they should have. And then the parole agent forgot to tell them. So this poor man had to go and scurry to get registered within those 72 hours, for the fear of he's going to have to go back. And they also put in where, in the release papers, the halfway house, the name and the address that they have to go to. Really, from correctional centers, it's very limited on the support. This one man saw it was like a pamphlet on a bulletin board, and it had Kolbe House on it. So he made note about it and was able to follow up with us within that 72 hours to start getting help. So there needs to be improvement. That connection, that support, we need to do better in our state, that's for sure.
Pat, I really appreciate you speaking so eloquently about your experiences with some of the gentlemen you've accompanied over the last couple of years. And part of what I hear you talking about is this assessment piece that you mentioned about assessing when they first come out and then periodically along the way. Could you tell us a little bit about what that assessment is? How do you all come up with it? Or what does that process look like? Is it systematic or as needed? Could you speak to that a little bit more?
There are certain questions that we're covering. What kind of housing are you in? And for the men in the halfway houses, it would be temporary housing. So there's a number for that. Do you have any income at all? Any kind of money that you're being helped with? We at the beginning, we check that they're not employed. And as the time goes on, we do another assessment. Hopefully they've reached that next step and they've got their job. Do they have medical coverage? We ask them, if they want to share, do they have any disabilities? Do they have any medication are they getting their medication if they need medication? Making sure that they're getting the support that they need. And if they're paroled, they may have this coverage, but if they're released, they sometimes with medication that could fall off the chart, and that person then struggles. We had a case like that recently, and now the person did get help and is evened out on their medication. So it's that, and I'm trying to think of some other questions. Deacon Pablo?
Yes, actually, I'm bringing up the assessment form right now. I know it's being revised by a couple of our volunteers, but just to give you guys an idea, our assessment form will be talking in a conversation, and it's a number that we put down from 1 to 5 for housing. We go from homeless or threatened with eviction to inadequate subsidized housing, employment, no job from 1, and then we go down to 5 to maintains permanent employment with adequate income and benefits. The third one is income. 1 being the worst one, no income, and then 5 is sufficient and well managed, has discretionary income and is able to save money. 4, food, no food or means to prepare it, relies heavily on other sources of free or low cost food. And 5, can choose to purchase any food the housing desires. 5 is transitioning mobility, no access or transportation, public or private. And it's all numbered from 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Access to healthcare, disability and physical health, mental health, substance abuse, network support. So those are the 10 questions in the assessment form that we had. And why do we do this? Because this will help us not only know more who they are, but what their needs are, and to keep track of their improvement or see. It gives us real-time numbers on each of our clients. We're trying to do this assessment form 30, 60, and 90 days. So we could see if there's improvement or not, or where they're going backwards on it. So that assessment form will be also part of the intake, the initial intake. The initial intake will be just the basic information, the second intake and the second visit is in person, and that's when we do this assessment form. So that's what the assessment self-sufficient form is all about. Hopefully that helps understand a little bit more for you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Deacon Pablo. I appreciate you speaking to that a little bit more. And it's helpful to know the systematic approach to it as well, right? Relationship and the numbers in the same space is a powerful thing. I see we have another question about employment for returning citizens. And I know, I think it was you, Pat, mentioned it briefly earlier about the people who are returning want to work.
Yes.
And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit more about maybe relationships that you have with employment agencies or places to find that work.
With employment, it depends on the severity. There are a lot of jobs right now, and we're finding Deacon Pablo sometimes has connections. Sometimes the houses they're at have connections. There's temporary agencies, like we have elite staffing that is getting guys jobs left and right. If it is a real severe offense, it is hard for them to knock down that barrier to get a job. We do have a connection with an agency called Kira that preps people for jobs. And they also have started a company, Clean Slate Project, which gives them a chance they send them out in the city and they're cleaning up different areas. And if you have a really severe case where they have to register, that gives them a chance to have some employment background. And then they get connections with, say, restaurants. It could be dishwashing or whatever, but they can get them a job later on because they say, this has been a really good employee. He's been on time. He hasn't missed any work. You can depend on him. So that Clean Slate Project is really great for men where it's very severe, or a woman, okay? Because they have both men and women working on this Clean Slate.
And we want to make sure when we refer to any employer, any of our clients, we want to make sure that they take them with a background that they have. So we're real specific on their background. That way, our clients don't waste their time. And not only wasting their time, but getting discouraged and disappointed and rejected once they find out what their background is, unfortunately. So we want to make sure we're real careful with that. Because when I say they, anyone, even including the city of Chicago, for the CTA, they say that they offer jobs for men and women coming out of prison for reentry. Yes, they do, and it's true, but it's for misdemeanor cases only. Class X felonies, they will not take people with Class X felonies. And I want to clear up a little bit more as far as I know we've mentioned a couple times, the people that have to register. When we say people have to register, it's not only people that have to register sex offenders. That's the one that I think a lot of us will go to right away, but that's not the only people that have to register. Nowadays, we have people that have to register with violent crimes, weapon charges, murder charges, aggravated arson. They have to register also. And they use the same registry for all of them. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Yeah.
And let's see, I think Bob put on a question. What about having the inmates register in jail just before they leave jail and waive the fee? Just a thought. Yes, it will make sense, but I think it will make too much sense. That's why they probably won't do it. But in order to register, they have to already have an address where they're going to. But I think once they have the address, because they can't leave the state prison without a physical address that they're going to parole out to. So yeah, definitely they should be doing a lot of those things before they leave. So there's a lot of room for improvement on IDOC on their part also. So there's another question there.
Okay.
if you want to
Add
take that
something
one
first,
from
Deacon
Kat.
Pablo.
Huh?
Could I add something first?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the employment question. So there are jobs. I think what the most difficult hurdle right now is housing. And landlords, they only have 90 days in these halfway houses, and they have to find a place to stay after that. And that's frightening for them. They're afraid they're going to have to go back to prison if they can't find some place to stay. And when you have to register, it's very, very difficult to find someone who's going to rent to you. Affordable housing is the other thing. Prices, rents are going up sky high. And, if they're earning from $15 to $17 an hour, they can only afford like a $500 rent. And it's like mission impossible to find something like that. So I think that's more of a problem right now, housing. Do you agree, Deacon Pablo?
Oh yeah, that's the type of things for anyone that's working in reentry, housing and jobs. Those are the two main things. And I see Kathy's question. I hopefully with my comments that answer your question. Okay, I just want to make sure. And also I see Dave McEvers put a comment there. If anyone else has other questions that didn't put them here, please, I encourage you, any of you guys to send an email with those questions, and we'll be more than glad to try to answer some more questions, or if anything, maybe network with any of you that are connected with us that might give us some ideas on how to give other resources to our clients. That is welcome also from anyone that is present here.
Yeah, thank you for answering all those questions and for sharing about the good work you all are doing at Kolbe House. And we were chatting before the start of the town hall. We know that we featured Kolbe House a couple times over the last few months. It just goes to show the growth in the ministry and the growth in the need and the growth in response to that need. We're grateful for the work you all are doing and sharing that with us. So thank you for that. And, as he's mentioned, if you got any questions, please send them along to the email that Dave provided there. And before we close out for today, I've got a few commercials that I'd like to share with you all about some upcoming events. So Kara's going to share a screen here and we'll pop up some images on the screen. So coming up on July 7th, we have our Diocesan Town Hall featuring George Kane, who is the Secretary of Connecticut Board of Police Commissioners, former probation officer, and volunteer prison minister. And through his experiences, he'll discuss the topic of ministering to and accompanying officers who are part of the carceral system. This is really a need that we've identified, particularly over the last year, and that we're trying to focus more on is as we go into these facilities, how can we minister to all people who are present there? Because we know that so many people are affected in different ways by the issue of incarceration and confinement. Then on July 13th, we have chaplaincy in women's prison, and that'll feature Sarah Jobe, and she's the chaplain at the North Carolina Correctional Institute for Women, and she's the co-director of the Prison Studies program at Duke University's Divinity School. And she'll be discussing ministering to women in prison, as well as share about the work of Interfaith Prison Ministry for Women in Durham, North Carolina area, which provides holistic trauma-informed services both in the prison setting and in reentry programs. That's the key part there, in the facility and then in the reentry programs as well, and bridging that gap. Because as we talked about so much today, that first 72 hours after being released is so critical. And then coming up on July 21st, we'll be meeting with Christopher Houston for our reentry town hall there. He's the coordinator for the Federal Bureau of Prisons Reentry, National Faith-Based Reentry Network. And this is an initiative newly funded by the First Step Act that seeks to connect and collaborate with other faith-based organizations to facilitate reentry services by connecting everyone virtually and making sure that there's some communication going on there. So we're excited to host him on that. And it sort of mirrors one of the tools that we have on our website as well. It's our listings page where hopefully you all who are part of your organizations and ministries have been able to list on our website, create a profile so that we can connect you with people and people can connect with you directly as well. And then coming up in September, we have a special event titled Reclaiming Wholeness. We know that 4 out of 5 people who enter confinement are either under the influence of a substance or come in with a substance abuse disorder. And addiction is an indiscriminate disease. And so we're having a conversation with 4 different people. One, Jim Wahlberg, who co-authored The Big Hustle, Evelyn Duhart from the Ignatian Spirituality Project, Lisa DeLaura from Just a Page, also there in Chicago, and host Cardinal Joseph Tobin he'll be moderating the conversation for us about sharing their wisdom from their own experiences of recovery, but then also how they accompany others through their recovery and some of the best practices that they have in those spaces. So we've got a lot coming up. You can find all that information on our website. I encourage you to register for any and all those events. They're free, of course. And before we close in prayer, I just want to offer up another thank you to Pat, Deacon Pablo, and Dave for your presence today. Grateful for your witness and your continued ministry. And as we get ready to say goodbye, we'll close into prayer here. I want to be mindful that coming up here on Sunday, we have Juneteenth. We'll be celebrating. And so we'll close into prayer about Juneteenth. And it's titled A Commemoration by Peter Englert. So if we just take a moment to take a few breaths as we digest the work and ministry we heard about today, and keep in mind those that we minister to. And this is a prayer for Juneteenth. Today we commemorate the end of slavery in America. This day partially reminds us of the progress made. This day also partially reminds us of the progress we have not made. We celebrate the freedom of Black lives in our nation. We grieve that we have not correctly reconciled racism in our nation. You created each person in your image. The 2 greatest commandments call us to love you with all our hearts, souls, and minds, then to love our neighbors as ourselves. Your love for us motivates us to love each other. If we do not love each other, then ultimately we have not expressed your love. As we commemorate and celebrate Juneteenth, we grieve this day. We mourn that our Black brothers and sisters have not been loved as our neighbors. We mourn that our Black brothers and sisters have been treated less than created in your image throughout history. So Lord, we confess our sins and repent. The healing and reconciliation we desire comes from the gospel. On Juneteenth this year, we ask you to guide our nation. May the good news of the gospel motivate us to love each other. May the ideals of your words match the practices of our lives. May a fresh empowerment of your spirit unite us together. Give us eyes to see and ears to hear your will and leading. Amen. Thank you all, and we'll see you around next time. Please be in touch if you have any questions.